Good to go? Good morning. Thank you so much for being here with the Senate Republican Caucus. Earlier this year, we held a press conference outside the governor's office and introduced our Commitment to Colorado legislative package, which consisted of 44 bills. The goal in bringing those bills forward was to make Colorado more affordable, to expand educational opportunities for our children, and to promote public safety. Our commitment to Colorado also aimed to protect our state's environment, create jobs and career opportunities, strengthen rural Colorado, defend Tabor, hold state government accountable, empower local governments, and to protect every citizen's individual rights. The bills were introduced over the past 120 days were substantial. They were pragmatic, constructive pieces of legislation that would have provided workable solutions to the problems facing the people of our state. I am disheartened to report that out of the 44 bills we introduced that day, 5 were passed and signed into law. On the topic of affordability, the cost of living in the state has risen to astronomical heights. Rent has increased by over 40% in 5 years. The price of gasoline has increased by over 130%. This legislative session, we introduced 14 commitment bills that were aimed at bringing down the cost of living for Colorado families. The only bill that managed to make it through the legislature and get signed into law was my own, Senate Bill 116, which provided universal licensure portability. On the topic of crime, we are experiencing one of the worst crime waves we have seen in decades. In Colorado, a car is stolen every 14 minutes, and violent crime has reached a 25-year high. We introduced 6 bills to stamp out crime, and only one was signed into law. Senator Cook's Senate Bill 145, which creates the Smart Policing Grant Program. On the topic of education, last year, state testing revealed a disturbing statistic. 70% of third graders in this state were not doing math at grade level, and 60% of third graders were not reading at grade level. In response to disruptions wrought by the pandemic, we sought to expand learning opportunities for our students. Of the 9 bills we introduced aiming to fix our state's education system, only one was passed into law, Senator Woodward's para-retirement bill, House Bill 1057. While it's disappointing to see so many well-considered and practical solutions to Colorado's most pressing issues, those bills die, I'm very proud of my Republican colleagues for fighting to get as many bills through as they did. As a member of the minority party, one's bills are often at the mercy of the majority. In fact, they're always at the mercy of the majority. We are certainly disappointed that our Democratic counterparts were not able to see the merits of the 35 or so bills that didn't pass from the commitment. But we do acknowledge them and recognize their willingness to hear us out. Given the state of this state and the dire economic circumstances that Coloradans find themselves in, it is certainly puzzling that Democrats didn't partner with us to pass more of those bills. Without impugning anyone's motives, I do wonder why Democrats with a legislative agenda that borrowed heavily from ours didn't do more to address issues of affordability, educational choice, rising crime. When the minority party struggles to pass bills that we want, it's unfortunate but expected. When the majority party fails to pass the bills they want, however, it's unjustifiable. For the duration of this press conference, my colleagues and I will discuss our legislative successes in greater detail, as well as ways in which we can build upon these successes in sessions to come. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Minority Leader-elect Senator John Cook.
Thank you. Thank you, Minority Leader. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Cook. I'm the Assistant Minority Leader currently, and I represent Senate District 13, which is Greeley down to Weld County line. As you heard from the leader, part of our commitment was including to make Colorado a safer place for everyone. We introduced a bill to combat crime because we're seeing a record crime wave. And part of the commitment to Colorado was to prioritize public safety. It can't be overstated that we are currently seeing one of the most dramatic spikes in crime in our state history. I think we all know the amount of cars that are being stolen. Even one of the senators here at the Capitol had a car stolen right out of the circle, and it was located in Lakewood, and the person that stole the car was dealing drugs. And so that crime affects everybody. In response, Republicans in the legislature introduced what would have been impactful solutions had it not been for stonewalling by our Democrat colleagues. Our public safety bills would have put real dollars towards training for local law enforcement agencies as well as towards school resource officers. Democrats, by contrast, believe that changing streetlights and improving trash collection would have reduced crime. An example of our real commitment to prioritize public safety can be seen in Senate Bill 67, which was Senator Lundin's bill. The Safe Neighborhoods Grant Program, which would have provided vital funds to law enforcement agencies to offer crisis intervention training for officers. Senate Bill 41 would have prohibited a court from releasing a person accused of repeat or violent offenses on any unsecured personal recognizance bond, but it was PI'd, and Democrats offered no good reason for killing it. By contrast, the Democrats attempted to address our crime was to introduce Senate Bill 1, which merely provided funds to change streetlights. Overall wins, though, we've had a few. Although we began the session with different solutions, we're grateful for the bipartisan work in 145, which was mine, Senate Bill 5, which was mine, and Senator Bridges. And these bills would increase mental health services for law enforcement, provide crime prevention and intervention training, increase the number of law enforcement officers who better reflect the members of their communities. And as far as the budget goes, Democrats stripped out funding that would have increased pay for state troopers, which is going to cause, I believe, an exit from law enforcement from the state patrol to better paying jobs. The JBC, though, did provide the funding to add 44 forensic beds at the Colorado Mental Health Institute at Fort Logan. And these forensic beds are for people awaiting competency hearings before they go to trial. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Senator Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Good morning. I can't quite tell whether the eyes are bleary or bright-eyed, but it's certainly one of those mornings. Our students deserve the flexibility to pursue the education that best fits them, and it's time that we begin to fund students and not systems. Test scores from the past few years have been frightening. They've demonstrated a disturbing trend. Colorado schools are failing our students. There's no other way to put it. Last year, less than 30% of Colorado's third graders were doing math at grade level, and less than 40% of third graders were reading at grade level. Colorado Republicans introduced 9 pieces of legislation that would have opened educational opportunities for the students of the state. Only one was actually passed into law. That was House Bill 1126, Senator Cook's eligible educator classroom expenses tax credit. So it was something to give a tax credit to the teachers. Important, but not fundamental. It's the students we must continuously focus on. Some contrasts with our Democrat colleagues would be these. Since 2019, our caucus has advocated fully buying down the budget stabilization factor. This year, the Senate, with our efforts and our advocacy, adopted an amendment to the long bill that would have done exactly that. It got on the long bill, but it was stripped out in the conference committee. With almost unchecked spending authority and billions of dollars at their disposal, the party in charge chose to prioritize the creation of new offices of government and excessive green energy projects, in my opinion, instead of the students of Colorado. Some examples of that are the statewide equity office, the Office of Disaster Preparedness, $65 million for electric school buses in SB 193. There were $207 million in green energy projects. In 4 bills alone, all Senate bills 138, 180, 193, and 206, there was 65% of the money needed to pay off the budget stabilization factor, the marker by which we colloquially describe fully funding education here in Colorado. Senate Bill 39, offered early in the session by Senators Kirkmeyer and myself, would have provided the money to pay off the budget stabilization factor as a policy effort prior to the actual budget movement, and it also would have created Hope Scholarships, a pathway for parents to fund the specific needs of their specific children instead of the ongoing efforts that exist in policy to fund the specific needs of a specific system. Woodward's bill, Senate 071, which would provided for learning pods for parents and students, again, an opportunity to provide some flexibility that the parents are crying out for, was killed in committee. But there were some wins. Always good to focus on the positive, that you can win from the minority if you press hard enough. House Bill 1057, carried by Senator Woodward in the Senate, will help get retired teachers back to the classroom. It's a para-flexibility bill that is important. And we were able to work to get additional money into the budget to provide some degree of equity for charter school students. Every student in Colorado that's in public schools deserves to be funded at the same level. And we were able to get that in through the CSI equalization aspects of the budget. So we're pleased with that. I am eager to hand over to the meeting at this point to my colleague, the assistant minority leader elect, I guess we're saying at this point, Senator Bob Gardner.
Thank you, Senator Lundeen. We have just finished a session that has seen our Democrat colleagues continue a relentless expansion of state government. While that has been going on, our families, our friends, our communities have been experiencing the worst affordability crisis that we have seen since the Carter administration. The cost of gasoline has increased by 130%. The cost of rent has increased 40%. The cost of a house has increased by 80%, and inflation has reached 8.5%, heading to double digits. To combat this affordability crisis, Colorado Senate Republicans offered 15 pieces of legislation to make the state more affordable and to try to help our families and our communities. Only one was signed into law, and that was Senator Holbert's universal licensure recognition, something we've been working on for years. Democrats killed over a dozen bills that would have alleviated this affordability crisis. House Bill 1021 by Senator Sonnenberg, which would have reduced the state income tax. Senate Bill 38, which would have made hospitals provide transparency in their billing, also by Senator Sonnenberg. Senate Bill 93 by my friend Senator Liston, which would have expanded the senior and veteran property tax exemptions. And Senate Bill 66 by Senator Woodward, which would have fully restored the unemployment insurance trust fund without raising taxes or fees in business. Significantly, Senate Bill 66 was such a good idea that the Democrats resurrected this idea and offered their own version in Senate Bill 234. Rather than adopting the policies to fight the affordability crisis, Democrats chose a relentless expansion of state government. 820 new full-time equivalents in the long bill at a cost of over $70 million. General fund cost of new offices and new government of $208 million with 166 added people in government. And in the midst of all this, the reasonable thing to do, according to our friends across the aisle, is to create more fees on the backs of our citizens. 17 new fees have been created. Coloradans will soon be paying fees every time they flush their toilet, throw away their tires, or bag their groceries. They've already had to pay fees on their energy usage in the face of this gasoline increase, on their fuel products, and even on their health care. Our Democrat colleagues opted to suspend some of the burdensome fees, quite ironically, while giving them 17 others. But they did so just in time for the November election. Don't be mistaken. The fees they suspended were just replaced with other fees. And our efforts to extend their suggested fee suspensions to ensure that Colorado would be more affordable were completely rebuffed. That is what has happened while we have been here for 120 days fighting for our families, our friends, and our communities. Thank you. Introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Smallwood. I'm the Senate Minority Caucus Chair, representing Senate District 4 in Douglas County. And, given that our Democrat friends are in complete control of these political mechanisms across the state, it is certainly very easy for us to point fingers at our colleagues across the aisle, and it appears sometimes like anything might go. Anything might be fair game under this regime. However, through what we feel is really some tenacious negotiations and some thoughtful cooperation, Senate Republicans were able to bring some of these destructive bills to a halt, have them die, or work to amend or fix some of the other ones. This session, we were able to negotiate some key amendments on several Senate bills and at least a few House bills. Among them was Senate Bill 153, the Election Security Bill. This reined in the Secretary of State's powers that a lot of our constituents were concerned about, allowing for more local control. We were able to amend that bill to eliminate language that basically gave the Secretary of State, that office, the complete authority to investigate what the office felt were true or false statements, true or false information. On Senate Bill 230, that's the collective bargaining bill, Senate Republicans were able to make some really meaningful amendments to that bill, principally by ensuring that the bill does not obstruct the obligation that county commissioners have to engage in the sort of obligations that they have under state law, and that they could engage in the basic human resource functions that they need to without undue interference from the unions. We wanted to ensure that the autonomy of these home rule counties was respected, at least to some degree. And Senate Republicans gave the majority party really two options. One would be to work out some of these agreements, to adopt compromises that gave counties at least some peace of mind, or they could work through the 250 plus amendments that we had prepared for that bill, really because our colleagues had concerns about it. On House Bill 244, which was the public protections from toxic air contaminants, this bill posed some huge threats to people who work in steel mills, oil refineries, medical device plants. We're really talking about the loss of potentially thousands of good-paying jobs across our state through regulation that is based more on fear than science. We all agree that the Air Quality Control Commission should regulate air contaminants. The trick is determining what levels of air contaminants are actually harmful and how best to work with industry to reduce these harmful emissions while doing our best to avoid job losses. The bill was radical in that it seemed to assume that any quantity of emissions is harmful to human health, and that is just not a very scientific argument. Senate Republicans negotiated an amendment that will allow the General Assembly to vote on and amend, if necessary, the Air Quality Control Commission's health-based standards before those regulations are made to address emissions. We think any instance where the responsibility of the General Assembly to exercise its oversight function over the executive branch is a real win, especially when it protects jobs for working class Coloradans. Senate Bill 138, which I think a lot of you refer to as the lawnmower bill, I believe is dead in the House, or at least still sitting on a calendar, and we've adjourned, so I don't think that bill is going to be heard. And on the healthcare front, we were able to work with some common sense Democrats to amend House Bill 1122, which was a PBM bill, to really amend out the part that we felt would have raised health insurance premiums for everyone across the state of Colorado. So with that, I'll turn things back over to our Minority Leader, Chris Holbert, to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Questions? start at Mary Ann and we'll go to Jesse.
Have the 17 fees that you say have been added to pockets of Colorado, do you have an average of how much that's going to cost each Colorado?
Anybody have that? I don't. Good question. Josh, let's get that information collected and we'll get it to Mary Ann. Sorry, I don't. Jesse.
I know you and I talked about this on the way up in the elevator, but I was curious, if you guys were able to take our back in November, what are 3 bills that were passed in the last 4 years that you repealed?
I think first it would be Senate Bill 260 from last year, at least modifying the fees and the enterprises that were created at CDOT. I use that as a prime example when we talk about affordability. The Democrats are running away from the gas tax fee. It's obvious. I don't think that's too harsh an observation that they are running away from the implementation, delaying that fee. Last year they were confident that the people of Colorado would support them implementing a gas tax fee and creating delivery fees on Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and things like that. The affordability concern, we were mocked for that a year ago at our press conference. And then the Monday before the session started, the governor and his Democrat legislative colleagues came out, golly, with the same 3 talking points we've been addressing. I think Senate Bill 260 was an embarrassment for them. It was about anything but roads and bridges. So that would be at the top of my list. Bob, Senator Gardner, would you like to address crime and maybe something that Democrats have done at law enforcement?
Well, we need to concentrate.
Yeah, come on up.
Yeah, going to trip over something here. We need to concentrate on what has become through the pandemic a culture of lawlessness. And I don't know that there's any one single bill, but we need to move from trying to pass bills that put criminals over crime victims in all of this discussion. We can restore that by putting an end to what are runaway personal recognizance bonds for multiple failures to appear in court. We hear from law enforcement daily that is their biggest problem, that even for the lowest level crime, people do not appear in court at the rate of 50 or 60%. And we need to attack that, but instead we spent 120 days in the other direction. Thank you.
Paul?
I'll hop in and I'll take a stab at both Jesse's question and Mary Ann's question. It's not a single piece of legislation here or there that changes a culture, that changes people's lives. It's an attitude. It's a group of policies, and I think what you've seen, and kind of going to Mary Ann's question, we know that 260, there was an analysis done of 260 last year as an example of one piece of legislation that the cost to the average family in Colorado was more than $500 a family. Well, that's more than the taxpayer refund, the taxpayer Bill of Rights refund that would come back to the people anyway, that the Democrat Party is now claiming as a refund that they're giving. So it's about this culture, it's about a shift in culture. We would repeal the idea that you need to create more offices and departments of government in order to let the people live the life they want to live. We'd repeal that idea. That's an idea we'd repeal. We'd repeal, as Senator Gardner just said, this culture that dismisses law enforcement. We honor law enforcement. We want safe communities. We want our children to be safe, and we want everyone on the streets to be safe.
So you all are about to run out the room to go see the governor. Let's try to get one more question. Ed.
This is the first postmaster press conference I can remember where you didn't discuss regulations at length. Is that because you feel that this was not a bad session for regulations and Democrats adding them, or is this just no longer a priority for you?
Well, I'll go back to the licensing portability bill. Really proud that we received bipartisan support for that. My friend, colleague, Senator Pedersen came on board. Also want to give a shout out to the folks at DORA. They recognized the opportunity, bipartisan support in the House, and appreciate the comments of the governor to recognize that really did do a great service to the people of Colorado, especially people who come to Colorado from other states who are in good standing, have their license, their credential, and be able to get up and doing business here in Colorado and adding to our economy. So that's I think a positive story we can come away from this session with, and wish that it had happened more. But 116, I think, was the bill number, and I think that's a great example. Thanks for hanging. We'll take questions as long as you all are here, but any other questions? We know where you have to go.